So I'd like to start off with introducing Scott Seifert, who who works with me. We've been working together since 2001, I think. Is that right, Scott?
Somewhere in there.
I've known Scott for a long time, and so he wanted to start off. I guess he was willing to kind of put together his thoughts or a little like a kind of presentation to get the conversation started. So why don't you go ahead and start, Scott? I'll make you the spotlight.
I just was going to talk about kind of the future of Apple. Where's Apple going and what's going on? Because you guys are going to have to make a lot of decisions. There's a bunch of stuff that's changing. We're kind of getting out of Big Sur. We're moving into Monterey, which will be out this fall. Talk about those things. And then I think the big thing about Apple's future is the M1 chip. I'm sure by now everyone's pretty much aware that they have this M1 chip. They're converting all of their products to that at some point this year, probably. They're going to get rid of Intel. And what does that mean to us, and why would Apple do that? Intel's been incredibly successful for a long time. Well, the M1 chip, they build it, they design it, and they're basically at the point where they're going to build every single component inside your Mac is going to be designed and built in some way by Apple. That is already having huge benefits with the current generation of M1 chips that are there. They're 30 to 40% faster than the fastest Intel chips that are out there. But one of the things that Apple's doing with the M1 is they're actually lining up what processes are going to happen in what order as you shove them through the processor on your machine, so they can optimize that and make it even faster. I did a little research on video editing on the M1, and was it really faster or was it not? And the big difference seemed to be is that Apple was stacking up those processes to render the 3D stuff and those titles and those edits and those special color changes. They were lining those up to go ahead of other things that were going on your Mac in the background, so that you've got the optimal process. And that was the big advantage, that it's no longer dependent on Intel on when things get executed. Apple can control that and make it happen even faster for you. And they're going to do that with everything. They're going to do that with the M1 chip. They're going to do that with the GPU. They're going to do that with the AI chip that they're going to start building into all their chipsets. It'll be sitting on all your devices to figure out, oh, they really like these movies, and I'm going to put these movies together. Has anyone enabled that little widget on the iPhone that shows you your pictures? Anyone know what I'm talking about? Any random head shakes? Nothing? There's a widget on your phone that all it does is show you different photos from your library. I have been blown away by how accurate it is. First of all, it always has the eyes. It's kind of a horizontal, and most of my pictures are either long, but it gets the person's face in it. So that's part of the AI that's deciding that. And it's also finding photos that I did not know I had an emotional attachment to. But when I look at it every day, I get that little bonus. And that's the AI technology that Apple's going to build in to happen on your phone and happen on all your laptops, and make that faster and even more powerful. I was thinking I was going to talk a little bit about some features that are coming to Mac OS Monterey and iOS 15 in the future. First of all, optimizing the M1 chip. The OS is just going to get even better working with the M1 chips, faster, more things in happening faster, quicker, and in an order that's better for you. Integrated devices and hardware. Universal control is coming to Monterey. That means your iPad, your iPhone, 2 MacBook Airs, you can set them next to each other, and you can drag and drop windows between them without any setup. The cursor will go between all the devices. You can use the keyboard and mouse at your main iMac on your laptop and on your iPad device. Has anyone seen videos of that by any chance? You've seen some of them. They're just kind of getting out there. But you're literally going to have 3 screens, and those 3 screens could be your laptop, an iPad, and your iMac, and transfer from one to the other and back again. Seamless integration of all your devices. Very excited about that. Okay. AirPlay. We already might use AirPlay in our home to stream YouTube videos to your Apple TV. You're now going to be able to do that to any Mac from any Mac. So you're in a meeting. You see the other person's laptop. You want to present your slideshow to them. Just send it to their laptop if they have it enabled. Does that make sense? A little bit? You can turn it on or off. You can just play One example I saw was my iPhone playing music on the brand new speakers on a brand new M1 iMac as an audio speaker, and they sound great. And we're just going to see more of that, that all your devices are going to be able to, you'll just be able to send whatever you want to any of your devices automatically. Live text is going to be a really cool feature. Live text in the demos Apple just did was in photo, in like a web page. You could go to a image and you can literally look at the image, and if there's text on that image, you can select it, copy it, and paste it into whatever you want. I think that's kind of mind-blowing. Now, Google has done this for a long time with one of their apps. You were able to do that, and it could actually translate things to other languages. Very cool. Apple is implementing this system-wide. So if you have a picture in Photos and you want to select the text, you'll be able to do that. On your web browser, an image somebody sends you, anything, okay? Pretty powerful, pretty cool, and it's going to be system-wide. And it also works in the web browser for searches. So let's say you click on a flower in a photo on a website, you'll be able to look up what kind of flower that is. Does that make sense? Does anyone use the lookup feature now, where you see a line of text and you look up a word, or you look up a website or something and it kind of gives you a definition? You're going to be able to do that with images and context inside that images. So if there's a picture of the dog, you can click on a dog and find out more about that breed. Pretty crazy, huh?
Ask a question.
Sure.
Are they tracking you with all this stuff? Are they saving information about you?
Great
And
question.
can you seriously block other people from doing it if you've got security issues?
You can't block anyone from doing it, but Apple doesn't do any of the AI or any of the other, like, and that photo search stuff is just the AI stuff going on in the background. Apple does not do any of that on their servers. They do it all on your Mac. That data does not leave your computer. Does that make sense? That's huge. That's really, really important. And that has been Apple's model across the board. One of the reasons, if you're a big user of Photos and you get those memories that pop up every so often, the ones on your phone will be different probably than the ones on your laptop. And the reason is the AI is assembling those on that device, okay? That doesn't get shared with Apple servers. They don't process that information. It's happening on your device and your device alone. And that also counts with your Face ID, your Touch ID, and any of the secure passwords that you have. It's not on Apple. It's on your devices. You own it. There theoretically is no way for somebody else to get into it because it's all set up under your iCloud, Face ID, Touch ID identification. Okay. Improve security across the board. SharePlay is coming to FaceTime, which just means that you can send somebody a video and they can watch it with you at the same time. And it synchronizes. So they'll see the same pictures you're seeing, and you can literally watch a movie with somebody. I think that's going to be really powerful. I don't think we quite know how that's going to change interactions. I think I might wind up using it with my 12-year-old daughter, but just because she sits in the basement and texts with her friends all the time. So we might be able to watch a TV show together, even though we're in the same house. Laptops are going to get a low power mode, just like your phone has. So you'll be able to put your laptop in a low power mode if you're going to be traveling or can't get to a plug for a long time. Nice feature. There's also going to be a new one under the Apple menu that's going to be erase all contents and settings. That's going to return your Mac to a factory default. Don't click on that unless that's what you want to do. So what's going to happen is it's going to be much easier for you to go to that menu item, click on it, reset your laptop to default because you have a new one, no data, all gone, erased just like your iPhone would be if you use the same feature, and give that to your grandchild or some other person, your church or whatever. Also, another big powerful feature that I think more of the designers will like is, does anyone use shortcuts on their iPhone? A few, some of you know it's there. It's coming to the Mac. Very exciting. I use it for one thing. When I have to bill my hours, I created an automator script to open up my QuickBooks and my car tracking app in the same web page, and I can fill out my forms and just do that really quick. So that's the one thing I've used Automator for. Shortcuts is basically Automator on steroids. If you've ever used it on your phone, it's very similar, but it's really meant for people to say, open this, open this, open this. Great, I'm ready to go for my work. I think it's going to be really powerful. They're completely editable, and it supposedly supports AppleScript. So if you do anything with AppleScript, you'll be able to put those Apple scripts in your shortcuts and make quick, easy shortcuts. Now, they might be as easy as open InDesign and open up Illustrator. And you double click on one icon that you create yourself, one little shortcut, and it's ready to go. I think that's going to be really useful for us. I think that's something that's been seriously underserved in kind of our community for a long time by Apple. It was either too complex. I think shortcuts is going to make it easy for everyone to do. I really recommend you look into it.
The shortcut that I have is when I turn my car off, when I pull in the garage, is a button I can just press and unlocks the side door. So if my hands are full, it's already open. I can get right in the house easily. Something like that.
So literally shortcuts works against everything, whether it's, your home items, your Mac, your laptop, your iPad. Also, people can publish shortcuts. So somebody might have already made a shortcut you're interested in having. And they can be as complex as, go to this URL, download all the images, convert all the images with this name, some kind of naming format, and save them in this folder. Make a PDF of this web page when I put in a URL. Really powerful stuff that you may want to look into and go. And shortcuts has been really revolutionary for a lot of people. It can do a ton of stuff with text, reformat text, put it in different formats, save it in whatever, and move it over here. Also, they're implementing the last thing I'm going to talk about with Monterey that I think is just an interesting feature is they're implementing something called Quick Notes. I haven't really seen very much about it yet, but you can use a key command or an icon in your dock and create a quick note. So instead of opening notes, creating a new one, you can create a quick note. Now, that's really cool. It's great. But it also integrates with Safari because if you go to a web page and you create a quick note, next time you go back to that web page, you'll see that note again. So I think for like web developers or something, this would be a great way to keep track of what you're doing on that page or whatever. Or if you go to KeyBank and you need to remember to pay a bill, make a quick note and it'll just show up next time you go to that website. A couple early conversations about it have been that it's really kind of, once you get the right mindset to use it, it's really revolutionary. Like it's really, really great. And then they just show up in your notes in other places. I guess it'll work on iOS 15, on your phone, on your iPad, everywhere all at once. All those notes will be available. I thought that was pretty interesting. I think that might be really cool for us. So what else? That's basically all the Monterey and iOS 15 stuff. And then just keep in mind, M1 chips, hopefully they're going to accelerate. This is going to be Intel. This is going to be M1. They're similar now. And Apple is just going to rev this up. So if you don't need to buy a new computer, I'd kind of wait for M1X, M2. I think Apple knows for the next 10 years where their chips are going and exactly what they're going to get out of every revolution. And I think it's going to be stunning.
That's something I would like to add is the M1 chips, the new Apple Silicon chips are only right now on the consumer level pieces of equipment. They're on the MacBook Air, 13-inch MacBook Pro, and the Mac Mini. And those are okay machines for professional designers, but they're not really the right machine. So
the MacBook Pro?
The 13-inch MacBook Pro is sort of in between. Joanne Dickey had to buy a 13-inch MacBook Pro because her I think she had a 2012 MacBook Pro, started dying. She didn't have a choice, but she really wanted to get the bigger screen. So you either have to get an Intel Mac, 27-inch iMac, or an Intel 16-inch MacBook Pro right now if you want a Pro machine, but those machines will get transitioned to Apple Silicon also. And I imagine they're going to be tons faster than the consumer ones. That's what everyone, because you don't have to cool them as much, and they're going to be designed for professional use. They'll have more RAM in them,
It might have a better integrated GPU too, which would be a huge
cores and other
difference.
things too. So like if you are in the market for a new Mac, I would suggest if you have to get one now, you get one now. But if you can wait till the next generation of the professional ones come out. And I don't know if it's wishful thinking. The Worldwide Developers Conference was about a week and a half ago, and everyone, all the rumors and pundits were expecting them to be announced then, but they were not. So they could be tomorrow because of the fact that Apple's now doing these remote meetings for their remote keynotes, or they could be in the fall or winter. It's hard to really say. So I wanted to add that.
I'm thinking M1X in fall on Pro devices. If the Pro name doesn't go away.
My prediction is August 32nd. That's what I'm thinking.
Are you wagering money now?
No, but there were people that were shaving their eyebrows and doing stuff like that based on the fact that their predictions were wrong. But I don't want to do that. So I guess maybe we can go into questions now, I suppose.
Well, did you want to start with you wanted to talk about password stuff?
Okay, so I would like to arrange for 1Password to be a presentation going forward, but I at least wanted to. I would tell you when I'm doing troubleshooting, the number one thing that slows me down and takes longer when I'm doing projects is when people don't know their passwords. You would be amazed how many people can't remember the like 50 identical passwords that they have. But that's the one thing that would help out. And Scott and I kind of have a disagreement about 1Password versus Keychain. Scott,
And we should discuss why. I think it's really good
I
everyone
think
knows.
so like
Go ahead.
so Keychain is built into your Mac. I think it's actually going to be improved in Monterey, but I didn't make a mental note of the new features. But I like to use 1Password because you can keep a lot more information in it. Besides passwords, you can do secure notes, credit cards, passports, driver's licenses, and you can have multiple vaults, and there's a family version and a Teams version. So really the other features are nice too, but the main reason if you might get 1Password is that if you need to share your passwords with a partner or a family member, it really works great for that. And that's not something you can do with.
If you pay for a family account, just
Yeah,
FYI.
it is paid, it's not free. Keychain's free and it does all your devices. So why don't you give your pitch, Scott, for Keychain?
I'm a huge believer, and I guess my 20 years in IT has taught me that, if I can get somebody to learn something, that's a great first step, right? So I just literally spent today for 2 hours with the client that wanted to learn. He was thinking, do I need 1Password? Do I want LastPass? I said, let's start with the keychain that's built into Mac OS X. It works in Safari. It works on your laptop, on your iMac. It'll work on your iPhone. It'll work on your iPad. So let's just start there. Now, Spike is totally right. 1Password has 50 billion features. You can share it. But I like to start on OSs, whether it's a Mac or Windows, with what's built in, and then figure out what you need from there. I'd rather have somebody say, boy, Keychain doesn't quite do enough. Well, great. You're really using power user. Awesome. Let's go to 1Password. You're going to love it. Okay. So I like to start with the basics and give people what they have on their Mac. When they grow out of that, that's the time to look at, more complex solutions. But just understanding Keychain, I think, is a fundamental way to understand, okay, these are how my passwords are. This is how I share them. You can share Keychain passwords by literally messaging the username and password to somebody if they're a relation, a friend.
If you want to get caught up.
So, you can literally share it with them if you want, but it is your own database of emails. And if you know how that works, 1Password, LastPass, the other stuff is going to make a ton more sense. So I like to start, run, walk, crawl, crawl. What does it go? Crawl, walk, run.
Yeah.
And then that's when I think 1Password's appropriate. I think I've seen a lot of people who we've tried to dive into 1Password and they just don't use it because it's too confusing.
there's a utility I'm going to put into the keychain or into the chat for sharing passwords, and it's a way to share passwords, like where you can have a timeout for how long they're there. So it's a little more secure than like emailing them or texting them.
It's a website that encodes the password.
Right.
And then you send somebody a link and they can see it. It's kind of like a URL shortener. Probably everyone's used one of those.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
It's kind of like that, but for passwords. Now, the only downside is you got to trust the website.
Right, and you can have the username and the web, like the location for it, and you can separate it. That could be an email or a text, but then the password pusher is like separate information, so you can kind of separate it that way too. If you want to, if you're worried about anyone snooping at your packets as they go through the internet.
Mary, if your keychain was hacked, you were hacked by your iCloud account. Do you think that's true, Mary?
Your mic, you need to turn your microphone on, Mary.
Sorry. When I was hacked into it was a few years ago, and it was because I mistakenly forgot that I had VPN alive on my router. I woke up at 5 a.m. and my Mac was on down the hall, which was weird because it was 5 a.m. and somebody had taken over my screen, so it freaked me out. So I've since certainly dealt with that.
But at that point, they were you.
Yes.
Theoretically.
Yes.
Okay. So that's part of the problem with that.
Yes, and
Right.
since then I've taken many measures so that would not happen again. First of all, VNC is definitely not the way. I said VPN, excuse me. VNC was the correct acronym. I took care of that, but it was a rough go. So I've since gone with 1Password only because it's not part of Apple. So that is why I went that direction. And it has done very well for me, just
That's great. Yeah, totally.
in my experience. I'm an Apple girl, so I totally understand what you're saying about keychain. I guess I'm a little gun shy now. So knowing that I do not enable certainly VNC on my router, I don't think that's ever going to happen again, thank God. But it was a rough go, and I think I like the third party thing only because it's third party. It's not something that somebody that comes in is going to say, oh, gee, well, I wonder if she has that, or I wonder if she has this. You know what I mean? So for me, the 1Password thing worked out. I'm not opposed to listening about keychain at all. I'm not opposed to it at all.
I want to be clear. I'm not
Okay.
arguing for keychain. I just
Okay.
think keychain is a good place to start,
I do. I agree.
get the experience,
I
and
agree.
then move on to more complex things. Real quick question, Brian. Major differences between 1Password and LastPass? It's a McDonald's and Burger King. They're both burgers, but they're completely different. So yes, they do the same thing. They're built on different underlying technologies, but the goal is they work very similarly with like plugins to the browser to capture your password and website, but they are two different things. I find 1Password to be personally more friendly, more Mac-like than LastPass. I find confusing and difficult for the.
Yeah, the
it's
way
more
I
of a
would answer that,
PC
1Password
product.
started on the Mac and then moved to other devices, and LastPass went the other direction. So I think 1Password's more Mac friendly because it started on the Mac, and it probably has like a greater market share and greater emphasis on the Mac because that's where it was born as compared to where, expanding to other platforms.
I also think LastPass was more corporate idea, like a corporate business solution,
Oh, right, it was.
than where 1Password was more the individual kind of thing.
Yeah, 1Password started off as an individual consumer thing and then added families and
Right.
business team features to it. And LastPass started enterprise and then had to go down to like the consumer devices with the iPhones and more the lower end market.
That
They're just-
totally makes sense. Thanks for answering that question. It totally makes sense. I was introduced to LastPass by PC network administrators for a company that I was a part of about a decade ago. So that makes sense
Completely.
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 It's kind of like
Actually, to the point where, yeah.
you raised Jewish, Episcopalian, Protestant, Jewish, Catholic, whatever. It's sort of that's how it starts with that. Kind of just like Mac and Windows,
Here-
kind of similar that way too.
also keep in mind, just like kind of like Zoom meetings and all the different ways we can meet meetings now, password lockers are everywhere now. Like there's 50 million different brands. Okay. I would keep with the big names like LastPass or 1Password or, Keychain, or Windows has vaults on it too. I think that's probably going to get improved in the new Windows 11, which was announced today, because they really need something. But just keep that in mind, but try and stay away from every other one. Don't just, sometimes I think 3 or 4, because kids tell their parents to get every different one, and they don't understand that it's like McDonald's and Burger King. They're burgers. You got one, learn that one.
Scott, can I say one thing real quick before you move on? The
Sure.
VNC situation was my mistake. It was my error. I didn't know enough about what I was doing. I was trying to access my iMac from remote because I was working away from home.
Sure.
And I did not, I wasn't technically gifted enough to do it right. So,
Yeah, I can help you
so
with that.
it was, well, the whole thing is that
Let's talk about it.
I don't need to do that anymore. It's okay.
Let me talk about one thing. If you want to do remote access to your computer, look at a third-party PC remote. One of those,
I don't
pay
need to
for
do that
it.
anymore.
What? Well,
I
if
don't
you don't
need to
need
do
to,
that
but a
anymore.
lot of people want to be able to do that. I'm a big fan of going with some of the larger solutions for that, just because pay the monthly amount. They have the security. They're the ones that are liable. If you need it, it's just easier to do that than to try and sit around and say, I got to open up my
No, I
router
don't-
and have this running on my Mac, blah, blah,
I don't
blah.
need it. I've learned a lot since then. And most of the stuff that I do as far as work goes is kept on my server. And
Sure.
that has a lot of security issues, meaning that it's good security.
Mary has
And,
a
I'm
Synology,
good.
Scott, which I just discovered.
Yeah, I've got a Synology, so I'm good to go.
Yeah, the thing I would say for that is there were people when pandemic started, some people took their computers home and other people used their home computers to remotely control their work computers. And so then that kind of stuff made sense for the remote control. I would say one thing that 1Password has is it has a feature called Gatekeeper, and it will tell you like which websites have been hacked and like which passwords are the same, which ones haven't been changed in a year, and it kind of helps you more keep your
That's
passwords.
also integrated into iOS and
Yes.
Keychain right
And
now.
the Apple's been kind of adopting, usually Apple adopts features that are really popular with third-party products and integrates them, and that's been added to the to Safari and the Mac, and I guess probably in the iOS also.
And because they integrated that, that's why I was with the client today for 2 hours, because he was freaking out. Like, what does this mean? And we had to explain that it was really looking at 2 security things. Has it been in a previous data breach, which just means there's databases stolen from, let's face it, TransUnion, that are out on the internet that they check for your username and passwords. And then just if you repeat a password too many times, they give you an alert on that. So do you really need to worry about that? There's a little bit of a balance there. And that's kind of what I was explaining to this client earlier today. Making him feel better.
So I guess, just to kind of further answer your question, Brian, I guess the only reason I'm picking 1Password, like if I do as a presentation for a topic, is just because I use it. So I figure I could ask a lot of good questions, or maybe do part of the presentation myself, or at least it's something I want to know more about. So I guess it's maybe enlightened self-interest as far as that goes. All right. So
Well, and also I'm a big go with what you know, and we know 1Password. That's what we recommend to our clients. That's what I think makes sense. I understand how it works. I know what the limitations are. That helps me troubleshoot your problems as well.
So I guess if someone asks like which one to pick, I say, well, if you're going to need help from me later, use 1Password. If you pick something else, it's going to be sort of a best effort. Okay, so I want to do a little bit about fonts, and then that was like sort of in my topics I wanted to make sure we brought up, since that was when we did the suitcase presentation, that was really popular and it kind of went on really long. And I'd like to do a fonts discussion panel in a future meeting. And I have a couple speakers I'm working on arm twisting to participate. And the thing that some of you may have seen this if you're using in this Creative Cloud, but Type 1 typefaces are going to support from Creative Cloud is going to go away this coming, let's see, is it January? I guess it's January 2022, I think, which seemed pretty far away until now. So you need to really start planning on replacing your Type 1 typefaces with either TrueType fonts or OpenType fonts if you're using a Creative Cloud. If you're on an old Mac with Creative Suite 6, you're still safe. And I don't think it means you can't use Type 1 typefaces, but they won't be supported by Creative Cloud any longer. So I would definitely start planning for that. There's a font. I'm kind of afraid to bring this up because, well, Deborah Conk is not here. She's the one that sort of found this out. But if you have Catalina and up, there's a protected fonts folder that Apple installs in your library folder, and you end up having a bunch of fonts that you don't want or never will use showing up in your font list. So I kind of am afraid to tell people because it's kind of like what you don't know can't hurt you. Now you'll look at your font list and like get irritated that you have to scroll down to it's like scrolling across the English Channel to get there to this Zap Dingbats. Henry, do you remember what those what's the name of the font that shows up a million times? It's interesting. If you use a Keynote or an Apple app, they don't show up. But if you use InDesign and you look at your font list, you'll see a lot of fonts that you have to go through.
Yeah,
Like
it would,
Noto list, Noto fonts?
Yeah, Noto.
yeah, Noto fonts.
There's other ones too, but Notos you'll have at least 50 or more of them in there. And
Yeah.
They're a Google font that's actually open source. I don't know why Apple has it licensed on their machines when you install stuff.
but there's a folder and you can't remove them. Like they're
Right.
basically in a protected folder, and you can't even, like, if you log in as admin or start up from another boot volume, they can't be removed. And I'm hoping that's changed in Monterey, but I'm not really expecting it.
Oh,
And it's sort of a irritating feature. Now I don't know what Affinity will do with that. That'd be interesting to know what they do. You know, have you looked at that for Affinity, Henry? Your microphone's
you're
off.
muted.
I'm sorry, what was your question again?
Have you seen those Noto fonts show up in Affinity?
No, they only show up, like I said, when you have Google, when you activate them. I haven't had any issues on my end as
Yeah,
far as that in any of the Affinity apps.
it really, it's not doing any harm to anything, but if you're OCD, it will really piss you off. That's how I think of it. So you just have to kind of let it go. So I guess I'd like to start with a couple questions that we got sent ahead of time. So Greg Pat asked, this is the very first thing, you'll have to scroll all the way up to the top of the chat. With the loss of Disk Warrior, my standard go-to for directory repair, all we have is Disk First Aid. I get disk errors that Disk First Aid can't even fix or repair. Volume startup, now what? Is a periodic wipe and install every once in a while a good idea to really build a directory? And are there a few things to learn with diagnosing SSDs? So that's a bunch of little questions, but having to do with repairs of drives. I used to use Disk Warrior constantly. I hardly ever use it any longer now. I also have a license for Disk Warrior, which I haven't upgraded. I figured those are kind of like tools that I can use on old Macs, which I come across still. Or I'll use those disk repair tools. I figured I'd buy them if someone was like, had a drive that died and they didn't have a backup and we had to be desperate to try to rescue it. I would use the tools for that. I do have 2 coupons from Drive Savers that they've sent me because I'm like signed up in their program for a $200 discount. So like if someone has a disk that needs to be sent to San Francisco because it can't be repaired, I can at least save you $200 on that. So they're really the third-party disk repair tools that's getting harder and harder to find a reason to use those, Greg. Normally you could boot up with the Option key held down, and you would can start up to the recovery partition and try running Disk First Aid that way. There's a bunch of different secret fraternity, sorority keyboard shortcut commands that like are hard to remember that you can use to start up from an internet volume, an internet recovery disk, which I recommend doing that instead because it takes longer to boot, but you can actually do disk repair. It's basically booting from a cloud disk, and you can do repairs that way. So you can use Disk Utility and try to repair your disk that way. If that doesn't work, you really should replace the hard drive or maybe try erasing it and then restoring to the disk if it's difficult to, if it's if it's an iMac where the glass is glued to it and it's hard to get into it, you could try erasing it and restoring from your backup. What else can I tell you about that?
So are you saying that you use Disk First Aid as your tool?
I'll use the older tools on older Macs. Like I still have like disks that can boot from them, but you can't. The new Macs with the newer operating systems, it's really difficult to use those on them. Apple's just clamping down.
And the structure of APFS is totally different. And a lot of the needs that you had for those old tools, because we're how HFS Plus worked, just doesn't apply anymore. Okay. It's taking constant, APFS is taking constant snapshots of your files. It's got its own built-in redundancy. It doesn't need to be optimized. We're on an SSD where slowness isn't even a problem anymore. You know what I mean? Like a lot of that stuff is just gone. Just the technology moved on. I think I've become a big fan lately, and I don't know why. Restore the operating system. I think it's a combination of certain things. Computers are so fast. SSDs are so fast. The internet's fast. So a Command R, download the OS from Mac, reformat the hard drive, reinstall it, and restore from a fast, USB 3.0 time machine volume, you're good to go. 90% of what you're doing, unless you need to have that machine turned around tomorrow, okay? Half of what you've done nowadays, if you install a new OS, turn on iCloud, and then do Creative Cloud, you're halfway there, okay? Dropbox might be what you use to store a ton of your stuff anyway. So a ton of it's in the cloud to begin with. That's kind of my take on it. I find it's almost, and I'm like that with Windows too in a lot of ways. Just let's reinstall it and go get that stuff again.
Well, especially if you have a good backup, which you really should have a couple backups, you can just restore, and they restore pretty quick now. It used to be, they're not instantaneous, but it's a lot faster than it used to be. I did put a link in the chat for something called Smart. I'm not sure why Scott was laughing. Did I have corn in my teeth, or I say something funny?
No, I was just thinking about what happens when we can afford 4 terabyte SSD drives that are for time machine volumes. Restores will happen in 30 minutes. I know that I've transferred like modern laptops, like 512 hard drives in like 30 minutes because they were both SSD, and I might have been using Thunderbolt and it was just flying. So it's just cool.
Oh yeah, I can't tell you that the projects that I used to always the projects that we used to figure 4 hours for seem to go 2 or 3 hours now. Like the Macs, the Macs are more reliable and and they work faster. So we're not watching the patience meter move as much as we used to.
I think we're also getting a lot less calls because everything's a lot more reliable.
Now,
and that should skyrocket with the M1 as well.
I did put the Smart Utility link in the chat, and that's a program that will look at your hard. You can pay, I have a paid copy, but you can use it for free like 5 times. I think it's got a certain number of uses you're allowed to use for it, and that will tell you if your drive is failing. So you can run that tool, and if your disk is, it's not perfect, but I guess you can get a false positive. I don't think I've ever gotten a false negative. So I've had sometimes where the disk is bad, but it says it's fine.
If it comes back with something,
definitely replace it.
Replace the drive. It's not even, especially if you're a professional on your desktop machine. Let's make the time to get that done. It's not great. It may not work great with SSDs, and in certain situations, like my SSD on my Mac, my 11-inch MacBook Air I've had for 11 years. It's been running nonstop, still going great. I think 11 years, maybe 8. It's always reported an error with the SSD because I run it every so often just to see, and it's always reported an error on that drive, but I've never had a problem with the computer. So on SSDs, it might be a little bit different. It was really designed for the smart reporting and spinning hard drives. That was the whole point.
they've added features for SSD, so I still run it if someone has an SSD. But I've only seen an SSD go. The SSDs go bad, but not as often. Like I very rarely have SSDs that the drive's gone bad. It's gone maybe I think 1 or 2 times I've seen that. So it's not very frequent. The stuff I've read about them, though I haven't personally experienced it, is that usually when you have a spinning drive, it kind of warns you. It starts acting weird and kind of like,
Beach balls, random
frustrating.
beach balls.
Where the solid state drives, it's like, I guess they kind of go like in a snap. So they just kind of go kaput. So I would, the thing I've seen with Smart Utility, if you have a Fusion drive, which is the early disk where the SSDs weren't, maybe 2015, the SSDs weren't really cheap yet. So Apple had a hybrid drive with a little SSD in it and a regular spinning drive. I've seen Smart Utilities say the disk is fine. And then 6 months later, I'm replacing it because Smart Utilities said it failed. And I usually try to talk people into getting an SSD, even if it doesn't say it has to be replaced, just because it's probably going to. But that's kind of a call, getting into a 27-inch iMac's a project, because you have to use a little pizza cutter to cut the glass off. You have to use these hokey adhesive strips to put the glass back on again. So it's sort of, I usually say it's a project where I need to have your Mac for a sleepover. Because it takes a while to do and you have to copy the stuff back and forth. So, I don't know, does that answer your questions, Greg?
Yeah, it
Anything else you want to add?
gives me a perspective I didn't have. I guess it's the transition between hard drives and SSDs. I don't, when you erase an SSD, you do that wipe and reload. Does it cross off bad blocks? Are there bad blocks on SSDs like there used to be?
Actually, every block in an SSD can only be used X number of times. Okay. And it's like 10,000. So if you're writing a lot to it, you could literally fill up. They handle that in different ways in modern SSDs. Okay. They give the drive some ability to say, okay, I'm not going to use that block this time. I'm going to put it over here. It's not quite the same. They kind of have the optimization built in,
Okay.
that kind of stuff. It's really changed a lot fundamentally when it comes to the SSDs.
Something I expect will happen with this, like right now, when we do time machine backups, I usually recommend a cheap spinning drive because you can get them for under $50. But I think when the prices come down, it would make sense to have an SSD for your time machine backup, because if you do have to do a restore and you're on deadline, it's going to be super fast. Where if it's coming from a spinning drive, it's going to take longer. So it doesn't make sense now based on the price of SSDs, unless like you have the money or you're really, really worried about a deadline with a dead Mac.
And that's a perfect transition to Henry's question. What are we hearing about the M1 Macs not being able to boot up from a clone of their hard drive? How will you back up to new M1 Macs to restore in the event of an internal non-removable hard drive fails? Yeah, if you need to have a machine that has to be working all the time, you want to make a clone. Okay, I'm not a fan of that. I do know that, and I haven't had a lot of experience with that, but I do know that Carbon Copy Cloner can now clone M1 disks. Okay, so I think Apple tweaked something that won't be an issue going forward. Does that make sense, Henry?
And I haven't tried it, but I do have Carbon Copy Cloner, and I plan to test it once I have time, like a slow day to do that. So clones are, and actually I'm a fan of clones. I used to do clones in the right situations, but no one ever really, people, when I told people about like you should do a clone and here's why, usually I would get ignored. So it wasn't, because it's not very intuitive and it's kind of a hassle. But if you have really intense deadlines where you can't afford for your computer to be down while you're while you're restoring to it, then you would do a clone.
A clone is a good idea along with a time machine hard drive. Okay.
You would do both.
I think Time Machine's great. I think people use it because it's basically invisible. I'd love it if they just had one good backup running all the time. All right. Instead of like swapping disks or doing anything else. And I do believe it's just getting faster to install an OS. Like I said, 90% of what you need is in the OS to begin with. And then you can just add your cloud services to it. So That's just my thinking on that,
And
speed-wise.
then a tip I would add that kind of fits in with that issue of a hard drive failing is, and I have this kind of like, I have to explain this or persuade people often to do this, and because they're like afraid to, I guess, or reluctant. But if you need to take your Mac to Apple for a repair, or um, it's expected by Apple that if you have to send your Mac and it's going to be back out and it's going to be gone for a week, they expect you to buy a Mac, use it for 2 weeks, and return it.
Really? Hmm.
It's like their official rental program. Like, I mean, people like, usually like you don't return something unless you have to, or you feel guilty, like you bought something, you didn't use it or something like that. And I mean, Apple can afford it. They're making, they're like the biggest company in the world, and their stock's doing great and all that. So that's kind of their official rental program is, your Mac dies, you take it in to get repaired. It's going to be back in a week because the battery needs to be replaced. You buy a Mac, restore it from your backup, use it, and then return it when yours comes back. I don't know,
Just
Scott,
on-
why did you do the thing where you with the gun to your head?
I just think it's ludicrous that that's their actual strategy. I wish they were fixing more in their stores. Also, I think we're moving into a weird time where like with the M1, just in this kind of like in transition thing we're in. Yeah, get an M1. If you need a bigger screen, get an external screen. It's going to be awesome. You know what I mean? Like that, it's a big difference. And then new M1 for you. I mean, we easily, and you can disagree with me on this, Spike, but we have machines that are 6 years old, 7 years old, 9 years old with the Intel chips in it and still getting decent operating system upgrades. Maybe they just now can't get Big Sur or won't get Monterey. I think with the M1, that is just going to go even longer term. I'm expecting my daughter's brand new M1 MacBook Air, right? Cobbler's daughter gets the best. I think that should last at least 5 years. And I would not be surprised if I take it when I wind up getting her something new for college in 6 years. Does that make sense? So I'm fascinated to see how long that's going to last. And I think that's what's going on right now.
Okay. So Judy asked about McAfee, and I guess I'll let you have that one, Scott, because I kind of don't like that McAfee, but I don't have a good reason, I guess. I just have other stuff I prefer.
McAfee, the virus program, or which
Yeah,
one?
Yes.
Antivirus, I guess. What was your question? You want to know if we like it, Judy, or?
Yeah, I just want your opinion on it. I
McAfee
went to a virus
antivirus?
one.
Here's where I come down on antiviruses. If you're on a Mac, you don't really need it. And I know I'm a horrible person. Okay, but if you do like a Mac, if you want to have antivirus, I don't care what you buy, as long as you learn how it works. Does that make sense? Like you can, again, it's Burger King and McDonald's for almost every single one of them. But if you know what it does and how it works, and you check it and you update it and you're aware of what it's saying to you, you're an awesome user. It's the people that install it and never know what it does or doesn't realize it's actually slowing down their machine. Apple has really good security and really good built-in antivirus for stuff that's not quite the same as antivirus, but I think between a Mac OS X and Malware Bytes, I think you're pretty much covered. In the Windows world, I don't recommend an antivirus program, but you should have the Windows built-in one running. At least start with what's built in and understand how that works, and you're more protected. Does that make sense? So it's that same kind of idea. If you want it, get it. That's great. Just learn how it works so that you really know what you're doing, because it can add to your problems rather than subtract from them. Okay.
I prefer Malwarebytes. That's just what I've learned and use it. I first started with it because it was developed by like an individual in Ohio that like I think in Medina, not Medina, Mansfield was an M. And so I started using it and I liked it. And then that product got purchased by Malwarebytes. So I just keep using that. And what I have found, there's not really viruses that you get on your Mac. What you get is something called adware. And what it is it's software where you might go to, it's like a phishing website. You go to a website, instead of getting a phishing email, it's trying to fake you out and say it's your bank or Apple or whatever. It's a website that tricks you into installing something that's going to make your Mac faster.
Not even install. Call
No,
us at
no.
this number. That's the most common one and seems to be incredibly effective.
Yeah, I guess that one, that's not the, I haven't come across that as much, but I have. But they trick you to installing, like, what was the one that was the first one that was the most common? There was, I can't even think of the name. It has,
Mac Cleaner.
yeah, Mac Cleaner's one. When that Star Wars movie came out, there were people thinking they were
Yeah.
getting the Star Wars movie for free. They got tricked into that. So, and basically, those are not illegal because they trick you into downloading it, and then you put in your password and install it. They actually, basically, the easiest thing to work around is the user, not the computer. So they trick you into putting your password in there and installing the adware. So the adware it usually just slows your browser down. It's doing things like click fraud. So like
Mhm.
if you click on websites, they get clicks on whatever it is with Google for their analytics. I have seen it mess up Apple Mail. Like I remember I spent half an hour with a mail problem, and then I ran at Malwarebytes, and it was like, holy crap, it actually affected Apple Mail. That was the first time I ever saw Apple Mail get kind of messed up, but it can mess up mail. So I usually install Malwarebytes. I usually do the free version and just keep it up to date, and you have to manually check it every couple weeks, or when your Mac's acting flaky, you'll run it. If you find something on there, it means you got tricked, and you probably should purchase it. I have people that get tricked lots, they get tricked once, we install Malwarebytes, I go back again and they have some more malware on there. So like
They buy it.
they're gullible, and so then I try to make them buy it at that point.
Just on another, can we switch questions? Does that cover
Yeah,
everyone on
I
that
guess
one?
did they answer, was that enough for you, Judy, or was there
That was
more?
good. Yep.
It's a,
Like what
I
you've done.
do, I don't like the guy who just died, but I do like McAfee. So yeah, that, Sophos, almost all of them are good. Just don't overbuy too. Sometimes they try and sell you the firewall and all the other stuff. Just get antivirus, nothing else.
Mhm.
Okay. They're preying on you in a sense. All right.
Yeah.
So, Henry has another question about the M1 being capable of doing decent, even high-end GPU intensive computations in the near future. My research in the video editing stuff is that yes, the GPU integrated shared memory is really good on M1 machines. Okay. Apple is probably going to make their own GPUs because of this thing. Okay. This thing is already amazing. It's an iPhone. Sorry, it doesn't quite come up. It's blurry. So anyways, yes, the GPUs are just going to get better on the Mac stuff. They're going to integrate their software. What's it called? Heavy Metal more into it. And I guess what the video guys have seen were like, the one guy that was talking about it was 8K video, real 10-bit 8K video in real time, 30-minute movie, transitions, filters, the whole kit and caboodle, and it rendered in like 5 minutes, and he was blown away. Okay. And I do think that is the target for Apple because they don't want their GPUs to be from NVIDIA or other customized companies. They want to just do that in-house. And right now they all use shared memory. That's the one reason to get a 16 gigabit. Actually, there's a debate kind of going on in the different circles about, does a new M1 Mac need 16 gigs of memory? Because it's so optimized that it's doing such a great job at managing all the apps and what's going on in power that 8 gigs seems to do the job for a lot of people. Okay. But since it is shared with the GPU, that might be a nice reason to have even more. Okay. That was my big debate with my daughter's laptop, was 8 or 16. I decided to get
You're
16
a good
because I
dad.
wanted to keep
You're a
it
good
as
dad.
long as possible.
Yeah.
What?
You're a good dad, and you wanted to make sure she had the best.
I actually just figure more memory, it'll last longer, period, right? That'll just be good. But I do believe that currently the M1s are probably a ton better than Iris graphics. That's been a real weak Intel thing that they've never really improved. That's an integrated graphic chip. It's kind of the cheap version of graphics where they can say it still does 3D, but they can sell you a $600 laptop because it's kind of crappy. The Mac Minis used the Iris chipset for a long time, and I don't think they've ever been considered really great in GPU performance. but that's over. And I think Apple, that's exactly the whole point.
So I think that I could tell a story, then I can think of something I probably should have mentioned earlier, or at least or thought of doing. This will be a hindsight thing for the board meeting, but the I went to troubleshoot a freelancer's computer. They had a 21.5-inch iMac, and I spent longer time than I wanted to admit trying to figure out why is it so slow in Creative Cloud. And it turns out that Adobe says you can use, I think, 4 gigs of RAM or 8 gigs of RAM, but you really need 16 gigabytes of RAM on an Intel Mac to run Creative Cloud now. And this person had 8. And it was a 21.5-inch iMac that was really hard to put RAM into. So at least for Intel Macs, you want to have at least 16 or more. So if you happen to have an 8 gig Mac, you're gonna, if you don't, it swaps to the hard drive. So you have an SSD, you can get around the speed. But if you don't, it's going to be really slow. And I guess I should have done a poll, like maybe who was on what operating system. I know some of you are still before Catalina or even kind of older Macs. When you get to Catalina, that's when your programs, maybe it's Mojave. Your programs have to be 32-bit. So that's why I've been doing programs like on Affinity, so that if you have an older Mac, you don't have to necessarily update to Creative Cloud, or there's workarounds for it. But that's when your old software is going to break. So you definitely want, if you're going to do because if you want to upgrade after tonight's, if Scott convince you how good the Monterey is, you'll have to upgrade all your Macs to be compatible. There is a service that fits in good. I just tried this. I kind of like it. There's a website called SetApp, and it's like their own app store. But if you like app utilities or gadget kinds of things for your Mac, it's a good place to go. And I got that because when I upgraded to Big Sur, a lot of my apps needed upgrading, and a lot of the apps and utilities that are used were in there. And it was actually cheaper to pay the subscription for this department store of apps than to upgrade all my apps to be compatible with Big Sur. So one of the program, they have bartenders in there. Now I use Contact. Let's see, I use BusyCal and Busy Contacts. Those were in there. I saved a bunch of money on updates, and I got it on sale, but I think it's $9 a month, and there is actually a long trial. So I've debated using that trial if one of the programs that's in there that's made by the same people who make Gemini 2. So if you're someone who has a lot of hoarded files, and I like to use Gemini 2 for searching for duplicates, you can get a pretty long trial period just to use that and not even have to buy the subscription.
So one other quick question has to do with apps. Henry, I guess a question from a customer: is Rosetta 2 used or still enabled on M1 Macs? Here's how that works. It is not installed by default. It only gets installed, Rosetta, which is an emulator for older style programs to work on the M1, okay? For example, Photoshop needs Rosetta 2. So it can be translated to work on the M1. They will fix that. Supposedly Adobe's in the process of optimizing all their apps. I think, what's the video editing one for Adobe? Premiere is optimized now for the M1, and I guess it made a big difference. So if you get a new Mac with an M1, it's not on until you install an app that needs it, which is your first thing, like Zoom needs it, okay? So you just say install, it downloads from Apple, it gets on, it's little to no overhead. It works great. It's amazing, actually. And once your app gets optimized, I'm sure there'll be an opportunity to uninstall it or remove it, or 3 years from now, it probably won't install. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question, Henry?
Yeah, these are, I've been collecting questions from a lot of my customers that have come in here, and they've been asking about, Macs are coming up, M1s, because we use it at the shop here. So they've been looking at switching over from Windows to Macs. Because, you know, at our shop, they noticed that I've been running Windows on my Mac here. So they've kind of been sold on that idea. So that's the next question I have. A customer had asked, what if I, you know, need to use Windows, or what are my options? Boot Camp, Parallels?
Parallels on an M1 is designed for it now, okay? But it will not run the Intel version of Windows. It has to be an ARM version of Windows, which I guess there is one out there, but I don't know if we really know if Microsoft is still developing it, if they're still going in that direction. Okay.
There are.
Are they?
Yeah, I've been following the forums on there.
Okay.
They're crapping in their pants right now with the M1s. They're out from the Mac, so they're trying to develop their own ARM devices.
Yes, they're going to be freaking out because they can't go anywhere else with the Intel stuff. It's kind of the writing's on the board, and they've spent the last 7 years not delivering chips. So I don't think that's going to get any better.
Yeah, Windows 11 is supposed to, they weren't going to release anything after Windows 10, but Windows 11, the rumor mill is that they're working on an ARM version of that right now to compete against, you know, the Macintosh M1s.
So I guess Parallels, you can download the ARM version of it. It's supposed to be fine, works great. Boot Camp, the last thing I saw on that is that Apple released drivers for Boot Camp that optimized it for M1s. Okay. So I'm assuming you can run Boot Camp if you can get the ARM version of Windows 10 and use the Boot Camp version. So that would still work. I would not recommend that. I could have a competition with somebody if they have Microsoft Office, if they're a Windows user and they have Microsoft Office on their Mac. I don't think they need Windows anymore, and I would argue for that. Okay,
Well,
I can't even go ahead.
For myself, we use an app called Access, which allows you to get access to a database, no pun intended,
Sure.
and it will not run on any Macintosh because it's integrated into the operating system for Windows.
Yeah.
You can't use it in Wine. You can't use it in any one of those Windows emulation. You have to run it in Windows. So unfortunately, there are some apps that people use that are just not available on the Mac side.
There are some. Yes, I agree. Remote desktop at that point, if you really needed to, it could have another one. You could use Parallels.
Sure. Like Publisher's another app that will
move your app. Yeah, move your Access database to the web and just deal with that.
Okay, that's good to know. That's a good solution.
There's some good ones out there now, and there's I don't really follow that because I don't really want to go down that database development road. But there are some really cool online databases now that you could just get up in seconds and start doing stuff. So I don't know about that. I'm not a programmer. There's probably a lot of caveats there, but that is seriously, the more you can move online, I think it's just better for you and your business. But you know, there are concerns.
Apple's going to keep selling Intel Macs. I mean, there'll probably be fewer models to pick from, but they'll probably always have
FileMaker.
Yeah, they'll have an Intel Mac for, you know, at least some choices for Intel. You could still just buy a PC and have like a cheap laptop, like, you know, you'd be like the church organist where you have a bunch of different keyboards around. You know,
right.
You can put it on the floor and use your foot, I guess, but you can do it that way. You can have both platforms. So that's, yeah, and I know it's interesting because if Microsoft comes out with their own chips, it's gonna, I mean, I don't know what that's gonna mean for HP and Asus and all those. I mean,
no, they won't come out with their own chips. They'll just build something on an ARM architecture. Apple's the only one that really wants to develop its own stuff.
Yeah, and that'll be interesting because Apple's doing the hardware and the software. So is that going to give them an advantage over Microsoft or not? It'd be really interesting to see.
I literally think it's going to be a whole different thing in 5 years. We'll see.
They have improved, like this kind of goes to Greg's question about the startup keys for the internet or the internet recovery volumes. They at least moved on the M1s. If you hold the power button down at startup, it gives you all your troubleshooting screens at the very beginning. So you don't have to like know Command R, Command Shift R, Command Option PR. You don't have to like know the secret fraternity shortcuts. You hold down one key and it gives you a menu of all the startup choices. I haven't used it a lot to know how good it works, but I kind of like that because I would always have to like look at a cheat sheet because I could never remember.
Somebody asked about VDI. They use VDI for emulation at work. VDI, I think, is VMware. Is that correct?
That was Kelly. Who,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
VMware, yes.
I think VMware says that they're not going to M1s. I don't think they care about the Mac market, and I think they're probably discontinuing their desktop. That's my guess, and that's what I think I heard. Okay, you should check with them, but I kind of think that's the direction that they're going to go.
That'll be up to IT. I just do what they tell me. I was only curious.
Oh yeah, no, Windows. It's so funny. You know, Microsoft used to be the consumer product, right? Windows 10, Windows 11. I don't believe it's a consumer product anymore. I think lots of people use it, don't get me wrong, okay? But not in the way that the Mac is. If you look at Windows 11, it looks a lot like Mac OS X. And they're giving it out free to everybody, you know, who has it already, at least for a limited time. I don't think they worry about their operating system nearly as much as they're worrying about the back end. Okay. They are the default solution for all those hosted servers, for all that stuff, other than maybe some Unix stuff. But for the most part, Active Directory is running the back end of most businesses. It's Office 365 is a turnkey solution, whether you're on Mac or PC. I think they're going to be worrying about the back end and they're going to give up on the front end. We'll see. Yeah, I mean, they'll have Windows, don't get me wrong, but it just may not be the driver that it was in the past. Does that make sense? They seem to be becoming more and more front end agnostic. Like, great, we'll make apps for the iPhone. We'll make app. Oh, did you hear that Windows 11 will run Android apps?
Wow.
Just like Mac will run, M1s will run iPhone apps. So huge. And there is no reason, other than some probably small technical programming, that can't be reversed on each platform. So it'll be very interesting to see how that shakes out as well. I think basically one of the biggest things about the M1 chip is that it's complete virtualization for everything. I think if you're going to be a developer in the future, you're going to have something like VMware or VDI or Parallels, and you'll just run your Unix instance on it. You'll just run some weird ARM OS that only runs on routers. I think it's all about virtualization and being able to run any operating system on it. And I don't think we've really seen that yet.
Scott, can you comment about Bill's questions? Because I looked at it and was like, oh my God, I didn't know what to say or how to
Which
answer
one is it?
exactly. Bill did the one that was a word attachment about the
Oh, Bill.
Windows handling and stuff like that.
Yeah, we should just do a remote session. I'll do a free half hour with Bill on those questions. I just think it'd be so detailed here that it may not be worth going over. Does that make sense?
I don't know if Bill's still listening, but that's a good deal, I think.
Bill?
Uh-oh, he's gone.
No, let's just try it not on mute. All I really want to know is how do you switch out of a full page, full screen menu quickly?
My question was for you. Do you have either an Apple mouse or a trackpad?
There's a trackpad on the computer. I've got a Logitech mouse that I use.
Okay, what I use for that is either my mouse, or actually I have a Logitech mouse as well, but I tweaked it out to do all the things that I needed to do. I use gestures for like full screen, 4-finger swipe to the left, and I'm right back into all my apps. Okay. So you might want to look at the gestures that are available in the system preferences under keyboard and mouse, and then see if you can customize those gestures on your Logitech mouse. Okay, does that make sense?
Sure.
So I think that's how I've solved most of those problems that you were talking about. I figured you had a different type of mouse, and that was the issue.
There's two Mac utilities that I think might help you too, Bill. There's one called Moom, which is like a Windows management program where you can say like, put this in the upper quarter of my screen, left corner, this is in the upper right corner, this is in the bottom half. This goes over to the second screen and uses half a screen, and you can kind of make like a dashboard of it.
Here, I'll show you.
Okay.
Are you seeing my screen?
Yes, I can see your desktop. There's a.
So if I take a window, this is literally Moom or something very similar. Can you see that dotted line?
Mm-hmm.
It snaps my window into that. So I can do that with all my various windows just by going to different corners. Makes a huge difference. Up in the center, does full screen. I really like that. I really use it all the time.
MOM?
MOOM.
MOOM. Boom.
Okay.
There's another
see which
one
one
you
I
can
have.
get from SetApp, which I thought looked pretty good. It's called Mosaic. So it's MOSAIC. And then there's another tool which escapes my name. See, I can't think of it. There's another utility, but it adds more gestures. So like you can, like if you like tap with your pinky on the upper right hand corner of your trackpad, it does this. But if you use your thumb, it does something else. I mean, I'm exaggerating, but it has a bunch more features to it.
Here's another cool feature that Moon gives you. If I click and hold on this, you see this grid?
Mhm.
So I can go by preset defaults, left side, right side, up, top, bottom, or I can do this. I can make it this 4 pixels. And I was doing that with this. So I use this all the time so I can kind of make custom window sizes. It's a great little app.
I will check that out. That looks interesting. Is there anything that lets you move an app that's on a screen that's hidden?
Well,
I switch back and forth between 2 computers. I use HDMI switches to change my screens.
yeah.
And when, as soon as I switch to the bank's computer, somebody's trying to reach me on Slack and I hear the notification and I can't get to it because it's in the hidden window. It's nothing that kills me. It's just really frustrating.
Can you
On
assign
Windows, you can like select the app in the toolbar and then move it. I just wondered if there's anything on Mac that does the same thing.
You should be able to move things between 2 separate windows in the Mac if you have them set up the right way. That's kind of why one of the things I wanted to take a look at you with, because when you switch on the KVM, when you switch on the input that you have the problem?
Yeah, pretty much. Because I switch over to the other PC. I switch the HDMI with an HDMI switch, so it's the other computer, and then some things are behind it. And I keep finding I need the things behind it, and it's just frustrating. I have to keep switching back and forth between screens, and I was wondering if there's any easy way to grab a program that's hidden on a hidden screen, because the Mac doesn't seem to recognize it's a hidden screen.
When you switch.
Yeah, and so move it over to I've got 3 screens, so I want to move it to my middle screen, which is the one I keep on the Mac.
I'd really like to see that set up. I'm not quite sure what's going on there, but I do think that what you want is possible. I don't quite understand what's going on, and I'd love to troubleshoot that, quite honestly.
Yeah. Okay.
But not remotely. I'd have to be on site for that.
Yeah, you can't see that one
Yeah.
on Zoom.
Yeah, totally. It's
Can't
like
you
the
use,
one thing I can't do remotely.
Can't you use Command Tab to pop up all the apps are open and then just tab over to the one that you're looking for? Yeah, like that. And then when you select it, it should pop up to the front, yes?
Right, but will it pop from, can I move it
No.
from one window to another?
I think your monitors aren't working correctly when you hit that switch. I don't think your Mac what I think you should do is when you do that switch, unplug the one monitor you don't see and then plug it back in, and I'll bet you money it works.
Well, the problem is it works when I switch with the HDMI. It's just showing the PC window from my other computer.
Yeah, I just don't understand that. I got to see that,
Hmm.
in my opinion. I'm sorry.
All right. So why don't you?
Failure.
I think we should maybe. I mean, it's 7:51. I always like to go long because I can't. I'm a hoarder for time for love doing programs. So I guess we should kind of wrap up. I don't know. Does anybody have any questions that we?
There was a couple questions around 741 that also came from some other folks that had sent some questions to me.
What
There
was
were-
it? And you want to read it to us?
Yeah, there was one. Is there a web page that lists software that's already compatible on M1 Mac somewhere, like a repository?
Oh, yeah. I think somewhere. I'll see if I can find it.
If you can find it, if you want to put it on chat, so that way you can link, people can link to it.
Yeah, I haven't had I haven't had anything. I know there's stuff that doesn't work perfectly or it's not totally optimized for M1s, but I haven't really seen anything that doesn't work.
If it's not optimized, it'll use Rosetta too, and that seems to make everything work.
In
Okay.
some cases, the Rosetta emulation is faster than Intel.
Wow. Okay.
So I haven't seen it, but I guess like if you really want to be really, really careful, you would want to check that. Like, I guess I wouldn't want to make a setting realistic expectations that some program you use works when it doesn't. But I haven't come across any like nightmares, which I think the way I've been describing these M1 Macs is for everyone was like paranoid Apple was going to shoot themselves in the foot and it would be a big headache. And it really wasn't. The way I think of it is they didn't really hit a home run with it. They actually hit a grand slam. I mean, it was just amazing how well they executed these new chips and how good they're working.
Well, they did it from the PowerPC chips to the Intel chips. I mean, literally, we had Rosetta 1 then. They nailed that. We never even noticed it. They changed their complete file format for every single hard drive when Mojave came out, from HFS Plus to AFS, APFS. And we never got a job from that, which is mind-blowing when you really think about it.
Yeah, sorry, no one ever called us like, oh, yeah, I just didn't switch properly.
Yeah.
Maybe there was one or two, but I don't remember it.
I don't know anything that we thought was definitely because of that.
The last question was, can you still use iOS apps on the upcoming final release of Mac OS? That was something that was touted during some
If you have an M1,
you have to have an M1.
if you have an M1 chip,
right?
you can do that.
Now the developer has to permit it. So
Got it.
just because it's an iOS app doesn't mean it will run on an M1 Mac. And there's
Okay.
some developers that, like I think Affinity probably
yeah.
wouldn't, because they want you to buy the Mac product, since they they have the Mac photo program and the iOS photo program. So the developer has to permit it, but if they allow it, you can run it on your Mac if it's an M1 Mac.
I guess it's pretty much, no, I won't say that for sure, but it's not trivial, but it's not hard to update the app to run on one.
So what website is this, Scott? I've never looked at it.
It's just called is Apple Silicone Ready? And it's basically a list. I'm not even sure how well it's managed. It might be a communal source thing, but it shows what's ready to go and what isn't. See, like VMware Fusion, she left, Kelly, but no support, ETA, no ETA yet.
See, this is helpful for a lot of people who are, may have apps that they're not sure about. And obviously the community out there has been updating, they're helping contributed. So this gives you a very good idea, depending on what your portfolio of apps in your business is, or at your design studio. And then you have a very good idea whether or not you can make that leap right now, or you have to wait a little bit.
So Adobe is M1 native now?
Mm-hmm.
What about InDesign? Can you look at
Illustrator.
I think they announced that InDesign was. They just updated InDesign,
I think
Photoshop, and Illustrator.
Yeah, we
Just
should
put
have.
M1.
I should put you on the panel.
The newest versions,
I was
right?
afraid you would
So
argue. I
correct.
didn't want to do that.
Yep.
it's
Yeah.
got to be the newest version. So that's
Yeah, you have to
right
have the
there.
latest versions. They literally just did it in the last quarter, like the last update, because they were trying to play catch up with the Affinity apps.
Yeah.
The Affinity apps are already M1 ready, and they said the performance is like off the charts as far as response.
I did
Look at
see
the
that.
Adobe Acrobat though, but it works in Rosetta too, so it doesn't really matter. But
Right.
If you're going to go to an M1 and you're a designer, seriously consider just going full blown update to the latest version of all the Illustrator Creative Cloud stuff and kind of jumping in hit feet on that. I mean, I
Okay,
think that's
so-
really worth
Oh, can you look up?
considering.
Scott, why don't you look up Suitcase? Makes sense to see what's there for that. I don't think it is native yet.
Nothing's there. Yeah, there's nothing on that.
So the back to school special has started. So like if you qualify for the educational pricing, I think you get free AirPods, which I always like try to, if someone's qualified, now's a good time to do that. So it's like it's an extra $200 discount basically.
Well, this is cool. It filters by class too. Anyone use DaVinci Resolve?
What is it?
It's a video editor.
Sarah?
I thought Ron used that. If Ron's still here.
No, I don't use it, but I know what it is. It's a pretty cool layer-based program, but, or I mean, node-based, isn't it?
I think so.
Right.
It's also got really cool hardware that I think you can use with it too. But
Yeah.
oh, the
All right,
Plexer.
why don't you unshare your screen and we'll just wrap up.
Sure.
Thank you all for. I hope this was worthwhile. I never thought about doing this as a program, so I'm hoping it's good. And if the board likes it and I get good feedback, this will be easy, make planning a little bit easier. And I think I would probably want to do it either maybe something just on Monterey when it comes out, or if when the new Macs come out, maybe do a kind of another Q&A session for those, because
I think it's worked out really, really well. Thank
Spike
you.
actually picks. He asked me if I wanted to do Big Sur, and I thought it was kind of silly to do Big Sur, right? Because it's been out forever. Are most of you on Big Sur or not? Or
maybe you do a raise your hands.
you know, I think it's really stable. It works really well. I think it's been great. I'm kind of over worrying about it. But now I'm going to move on to the next OS. Don't do any betas. The only beta you might want to do is the iPhone beta, but don't do any betas on any production machines unless you buy it or have a special machine you can do the betas on. But the only one I might do is my production iPhone, because iOS 15, I did it with the last one and it was pretty good. When it got to like release candidate, that's when I did it.
I'd wait till not right now. It's a developer version. I wouldn't do that at all. But when it gets to what do they call it for the consumer, Scott?
RC, release candidate, or the public beta.
Yeah, public beta.
You may not even want to do the first public beta. You might want to wait for the release candidate, which means it'll be out in 3 weeks.
I'm risk adverse. I usually figure I could learn what goes wrong when customers upgrade that shouldn't, so I don't have to do mine and suffer. But I do have my laptop now and some spare computers I can do R&D on. But yeah, if you have a primary machine, don't be that brave. I waited till 11.4 to go to Big Sur just because I didn't want my bald spot to get any bigger.
Well, you guys have been really fabulous. Thank you so much for dumping your brains on us. We really appreciate it.
All right, you're welcome. So,
It was helpful.
I guess
Very helpful.
So I don't know what's happening next month. I'm gonna probably get by the skin of my teeth again, but I'm gonna work hard to have a program for July.
Well, thanks everyone for coming. We appreciate your presence here and certainly appreciate your questions. Keeps these guys on their toes. And we do appreciate everything, everybody that's here and everybody that has contributed to it.
Thank you. It was fun.
Awesome. Yeah, good job, guys.
Ken, well done.
Thank you.